Hello and welcome to another episode of Ask SoulBird. My name is Roberta and I'm really glad to have you here. So today's question was, and quite simply, why watercolours? And I like this question. I like the potency of it. Why watercolours? I'm going to answer this question from my own journey to using watercolours. Now, I never used to use watercolours. During all of my training and my time at college and university, I was actually an oil painter. And, occasionally I'd work with acrylics simply because they dried quickly, but oil paints were my love. They were so magical in the depths of colours and layers that you could create from them. However, the reason I use watercolours is because it was a very practical reason, actually. Many moons ago, I had reached a place where I'd finished university and I was finding my way in the world, and I moved into a little tiny flat. And this flat didn't have much space, and I was aware that if I wanted to continue working with oil paints, it would require space. And if any of you are aware or have already worked with or do work with oils, you will know that they are incredibly smelly. You have to work with white spirit, and so it can be quite a messy business, and you really need a dedicated space for creativity. And I did not have that. And what I did at that time was I crafted a little tiny table next to the one little window that I had in my lounge. And I thought, I have to create. I could feel that my soul was slightly withering. And I had a yearning, I had that calling that I must paint. However, I knew that I could not paint with oils in this particular flat that I was living in. And so what was my next best option? That was easy, that could be packed away quite easily, that didn't smell, that didn't take up much space. You guessed it, I started painting in watercolours. And I have to say that at university, at college, I was not taught how to paint in watercolours. I had touched upon it with my original art teacher that I had when I was much younger, so between the years of 6 and 8. But I didn't return to it during my college years and university years. So no one at particularly university, in my understanding, had considered that watercolour was a valid medium to paint with. Maybe that sounds a little bit harsh and maybe I misunderstood, but I was never encouraged to use watercolours at university. It was mainly acrylics or oil paints. And maybe the reasons for that is because the materials that are used for oil paintings and acrylics are often sometimes more expensive, not always. And so there's a perceived value, higher value that's placed on oil paints and oil paintings rather than watercolour paintings. There was a really heavy emphasis that this medium is not regarded a professional medium to be working with if you want to become a professional artist. However, at that time in my life, I just needed to get back on the horse. I just needed to start creating. And so I began. I found some old watercolours and I simply started. So in those early days, it was out of practical necessity and space. And so if any of you are listening to this out there who don't have much space and maybe need the simplicity of packing everything away because, you know, your dynamics in the home space doesn't allow for that, then watercolors is a really good way to begin back on your artistic journey. They are simple, they are water-based, you know, you have access to water, you need just some simple paintbrushes and some simple colors, you know, just starting with the simple 3 colors of blue, yellow and red. Begin. Anyway, as my journey progressed, you know, I fell in love with watercolors, and at that time I was also using inks, and I loved the way that these pigments engaged with water. I mean, it's very simple, but I found the movement of watercolors so mesmerizing on the page. And, you know, some people will say that watercolors are actually one of the most difficult mediums to master, and I would agree with them. However, it depends how you're using them. You know, if you've seen my artwork, you will have noticed I don't paint realistic colors, for instance. I see in vibrancy, I see in saturated colors in the world around me, and I find that colors themselves have a message. They have a symbolic meaning behind them, and so I commonly use quite bright colors in places that you wouldn't expect them to be, and I enjoy that. And the one thing I want to say about watercolors in comparison to acrylics and oils is that translucent quality. And maybe you will only understand this if you have a play with them yourself, but for a watercolor painting to build in its vibrancy, it requires actually many layers. And what some people find very difficult with watercolors is that once you've got the color down, you can't rub it out, you can't cover it over. So watercolors is the greatest master of teaching you how to surrender to mistakes and to flow with them. And, you know, I want to add here, they are always only ever perceived mistakes. In art, in my opinion, there is never any mistakes. It is only another step in the creative process. And so to create the vibrancy of color in watercolors, it requires layer upon layer upon layer. And the beauty that I love with watercolors is that you can always see through the many different layers. And I have always looked at watercolors as a deep reflection of my life as a soul in a human body. And, you know, you could perceive this through the lens of watercolors having many layers to create their depth of expression, the vibrancy of their colors. And that is mirrored in my own and your own soul's journey through life, that we are forever learning different layers, and we're growing and we are evolving, placing a new layer upon another layer upon another layer. Yet we never erase what has been before. We simply build upon that as a foundation. And so watercolors for me is a beautiful reminder of that we are forever evolving, and that we can place yet another beautiful color, another layer upon something else. Even if we perceived it to be an incorrect shade, an incorrect color, an incorrect form, we can still place another layer upon that and make it something vibrant and beautiful. and we learn to surrender to what is. With watercolours, you are always going to be challenged with the fact that once the colour is down, you are unable to rub it out. And for me, I have chosen to keep using watercolours. It is a great teacher. My next reason for working with watercolours, why watercolours, is my connection to the spirit of water. Now again, I relate all of my art practice to my spiritual practice, and there is no separation between the two. And to work with water is the one way that I enter into ceremony with my artworks. And water is so crucial to our own physical bodies. It is crucial to the earth. It is crucial to plants. It is something that is necessary and needed. And as you may already know, water is a keeper and a holder of memory, of information. And if you don't already know, I would highly recommend you checking out the work of Dr. Emoto. And he has studied and put forward some incredible imagery and books out there about this particular topic on how water holds memory. And so we must be mindful of how we speak to it, how we communicate with it, and what we use it for. And so for me, when I work with water as a medium that is supportive of the creative process with watercolours, the paints, I also use that water in prayer. And what I mean by that is I share my heart's intention with the water before creating certain paintings. And so it's almost like a programming of the water itself, so that the energetics of that spiritual artwork that I am creating is supported by a natural element that is so innately familiar to our physical bodies, to Mother Nature, to the earth, to the plants, and therewith to you, the viewer who sees my artwork, that may not know the prayers that have been placed in the water that I have used to paint that painting. But what I sense and what I understand from other people's feedback is that those prayers have been felt through the experience of witnessing the artwork. So really what I'm trying to say is, why watercolours? Because of the word water. That element is everything. And I regard water one of our greatest allies in life, because it is found within us. And so I adore that I'm using an art practice that actually works with an element that is medicinal, not only because it is a carrier of medicine in the way that I work with it, it is an ally of ours that I hope to reawaken and remind people of actually how powerful the element of water is when we recognize it as a living spirit that is both within us and within, if you are a watercolor artist, and within the medium that you are creating with. So that is my answer for why watercolors. I could probably share more reasons as to why I use watercolors, but I hope what I have shared today is helpful, interesting, and inspiring. And I'd love to hear any more questions that you have. Please pop them in the comments below, and I will get round to them in a video like this in the coming weeks. Lots of love from me. Mwah. Have a beautiful day.